Hello and welcome to a podcast for National Insect Week 2016, and I'm delighted to be joined by MG Leonard, the author of Beetle Boy. So thank you for joining us.
Hello, it's nice to be here.
Now, it's been an absolute success. It came out in March this year. It's gone through, it's in 5-6 different languages now, is it?
30.
30 different languages.
Yes, we sold it into Afrikaans last week and it's published in Japan in 6 weeks' time.
Could you tell us a little bit about Beetle Boy? What's the book about?
So at the heart of the book is a relationship between a boy called Darkus and a rhinoceros beetle whom he calls Baxter. And the relationship between the boy and the beetle is the thing that carries the boy through a series of adventures that have come out of the strange, mysterious disappearance of his father. So his father, Bartholomew Cuttle, works at the Natural History Museum, and at the beginning of the book he walks into a vault, into a room which he locks from the inside and disappears. And so Darkus finds himself alone in the world, and it's at this point that he meets the beetle, and together with the beetle and some new friends he sets out to discover what happened to his father.
Is it true that you weren't too keen on insects?
Yes. Saying not too keen is probably a vast understatement. I was really frightened of insects as a child, all sorts of insects, everything. Pretty much any kind of creepy crawly used to scare me. The only thing I never had trouble with was worms, but that's probably because they can't chase you. Yes. So I definitely was someone who was scared of insects as a child, and as I grew into an adult, I just generally despised them without any kind of rationale behind that, but it was mostly born out of fear.
You've just written a book, Beetle Boy. What changed?
It was one of those moments when you suddenly realise your total ignorance and foolishness, which happens to us as we grow up. But I was writing a very derivative kind of story, and I had this environment that was villainous, and I thought I'd fill it with villainous things, and the natural things that you think of when you think of villainy are snakes and rats and creepy crawlies. And I started to write, and I thought I need to describe the creepy crawlies well, and I'd never actually thought about the term creepy crawly, and I started writing and I suddenly thought, well, hang on, what is a creepy crawly and what isn't a creepy crawly? And I thought, well, it's obviously an insect is a creepy crawly. But then I realised, of course, that a spider's not an insect, it's an arachnid. I was polarised by my own ignorance, because I just thought I don't want to write something for it to really show how dumb I actually am, my absolute ignorance about the subject matter. So I did what everyone does, I Googled it. I literally wrote down every single creature that I thought was a creepy crawly, and I Googled them. I know that sounds a bit absurd. And beetle was kind of at the top of my list, and I put beetle into Wikipedia. And when I got the Wikipedia page, and then I scrolled down, and there were all these facts about how, there were more species of beetle than anything else on the planet, and they could live in every habitat, and they would come in every size and every colour. And I was suddenly confronted with huge ignorance, my own ignorance, and shame, actually, that I was going to chuck all these beetles into a villainous lair, when I suddenly realised that, as far as the ecosystem is concerned, they're heroic, we're the villains. So I assumed there must be a great book that I could read to my son where beetles were the good guys, and so I did. I went to the British Library, and I went to the catalogue and I looked. And there wasn't one. And it's that thing where you spend 10 years hoping that one day you'll come up with a unique, original idea. And it was that moment in the British Library when, the angels sang, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is the unique, original idea. Except I don't know anything about beetles.
So everything that you've written in this book all came from that one moment of realising I don't know anything about this. So how long has it been since that moment?
That moment was about 10 years ago. And it's quite a shock that you realise that you want to write a story about something you know nothing about. And I couldn't just sit down and write it. And I knew it had to be good, and it had to be truthful and faithful to the insects. And so I started gently researching, and then realised it's a vast field. But it took me about 4 or 5 years to develop enough knowledge to be able to write fluidly. Otherwise, I was just mostly regurgitating stuff that I was reading. It wasn't really a story. It was, oh, here's a cool fact and here's another cool fact, kind of pieced together.
So this is a thing that comes through in the book. There's a lot of respect for scientists, curators. At least that's what I got across from it.
To begin with, I didn't even know how you found an entomologist. They seemed like these strange, almost like, this is going to sound weird, and I apologise to all entomologists, but my kind of perspective of people who were into insects before, when I was scared of them, was pretty much the same as what my perspective was of taxidermists. They were kind of oddballs that liked insects and dead things. Like, I thought that was a peculiar thing. And then actually when I was confronted with my own ignorance and realised that I was the one actually who is living in, a really distant way from the world, suddenly those people that I had considered to be oddballs kind of became my heroes. So whenever I read up about an entomologist going on a field trip or whatever, they were all like Indiana Jones type people in my head. Like, I imagined like them being heroic, like discovering that information out. So that was kind of how those characters were born, out of my sudden newfound respect and admiration for people who spent their lives exploring these things.
Now, that seems to happen as well with people's views in the books of insects. Often the first encounter is quite a negative one, but they seem to transition in the book towards an appreciation. Was that a deliberate aim that you had to try and convert people? Yes,
because I know if as a young girl, if you'd said, here, read a book about beetles, I would have just refused. I mean, I would absolutely have refused, because I would have been, no, I don't like them, I don't want to read that. And so I didn't want to make it like, a bunch of kids who already loved insects just doing a thing. I really wanted to show, because that's a journey that I have myself gone on. So I have been through that transition. I have realised that, most of my fear is born from not understanding, assuming that I can be hurt or harmed by insects, not really even knowing what they ate, how they functioned, all of those fundamental things that you can make assumptions about with mammals, you can't make with insects. And so as I've learnt all those things, I've become fascinated and intrigued, and I see them in an endearing way now. But yeah, I wanted the characters to go on that journey. But Darkus, even the first time he meets the rhinoceros beetle, who becomes his best friend, he's not sure. It's startling until he understands the way that the insect is. So I wanted that to be an important part of it, that kind of taking the reader on that journey, because more people don't like insects than we realise, I think.
So you do mention that you encounter about 30 different species throughout the book. What is your favourite group that you're endeared to?
I mean, I work in a theatre and I love character, and there are some beetles that have extraordinary skills but lack character. So like the bombardier beetle, for example, any child, if you say the sentence, and then acid explodes out of the beetle's butt, will just fall around laughing. And whilst that is a gift, I could, in my wildest imagination, I couldn't create something as crazy as a bombardier beetle. And so, whilst I love the bombardier beetles for their awesome narrative function and their humour, to me, the reason why they're not a central character in the book is can't really personify them in an adorable way. The 4 beetle protagonists, let's say, that are at the heart of the book, the rhinoceros beetle, which for me, I think the rhinoceros beetle is such an impressive looking beast. I have a very childish imagination, obviously, but when I saw it, I just thought it looked like, the insect version of a Batmobile. It looks like some kind of ninja warrior tank, and the fact that it flies is amazing. But actually, when you do look at the face of a rhinoceros beetle, they are quite cute. And the fact that they like to eat bananas and they're quite clumsy, and so they've got that lovely mix of kind of deadly and awesome, but kind of adorable, which works really well in a story. And obviously, you know, the jewel beetle is such a gloriously pretty creature, and I really wanted beetles that would appeal to girls as well as boys. I didn't want it to be a very boy-centric story. I mean, I'm a girl myself, and so I wanted the beauty of the insects to shine through as well. So I definitely wanted a stunning jewel beetle who, you know, had a slightly vain personality. So the ones that kind of got the bigger parts in the show, as it were the ones that lent themselves to that kind of personification.
Did you discover any during the writing process that almost changed the book that you were writing? You see a character and you're like, I need to include these people, maybe in a small way at least.
Yeah, it's the habitat, the diet, the defense mechanisms of beetles basically dictated how that book ended. Sometimes I was like, oh, scrap that, I've got a much better thing because these guys do something awesome, you know.
Yeah.
And that was the thing, was that trying to work out how I could surprise the reader, because one of the things there are so many books out there and lots of them are beautiful stories told brilliantly. If you can have magic in a theatre production or a book, and magic I kind of define as something that the reader has never imagined before and in a theatre it's never seen before, then it doesn't matter whether you like insects or not. That scene as it plays out is going to be new, and if it's new and if it's written well enough, that's a bit of magic. And I think that the success of the book depends on, you know, having a number of those moments where the reader will have never ever imagined what they are reading before. But this story has really hit a chord with so many people, and I suspect it's because it's got some of those magic moments. And I learnt a lot writing the first book. I wrote the first draft of the second book in 6 weeks at the end of last summer. However, could only write it with 4 years worth of research, like, underneath it, because I want to introduce more beetles, different beetles, and there's so much about insects and beetles that are fascinating that there's no way you can squeeze it all into one book, which is why it has to be a trilogy. But I want to look at things like metamorphosis and, you know, things like that I haven't yet had the opportunity to explore. Will get explored in book 2 and book 3.
Well, Maya, that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much for talking
Pleasure.
to us today. And please do go out and buy Beetle Boy. Will be in Waterstones.
It's in every single bookshop. You can get it on Amazon, you can get it in Waterstones, Blackwell's, everywhere.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.